Hello once again. A warm welcome to everyone joining us today across Africa and beyond. My name is Mchel Omason-Dudu. I'm an account executive at the Numa Group, and yes, I am proudly Gen Z. You didn't think you were going to attend a webinar for Gen Zs and a Gen Z would not moderate. I'm very excited to moderate this conversation because it's such a timely conversation, and I've seen firsthand, especially with brands I've worked with across various sectors, how powerfully we Gen Zs are shifting communication, culture, and influence. Today's webinar session is part of Influence 21, which is Newmark's Pan-African Thought Leadership Series, examining the shifts reshaping how people connect, engage, and build trust. This webinar is titled The Gen Z Revolution, Redefining Influence, Identity, and Connection. And like I said just a few seconds ago, it could not be more timely because we are not waiting for the future, we are actively reshaping the now. So, just a few housekeeping rules
Mm.
before we get into it. If you have a question, please drop it anytime using the Q&A box. But I would really encourage you to use the chat section to share your thoughts, reflections. If something resonates with you, please drop it down there. And also reactions as much as possible. We want this to be as interactive and engaging as possible. Regarding the questions, we'll respond to those later in the session. Now, going right into it, influence is a word that has been used a lot this year. And the one thing I know I've personally learned is that influence no longer flows from the top down. In 2025 alone, we've seen a lot of powerful Gen Z moments and how they've, impacted shifts across the continent. Starting from Kenya's finance bill protest, which has become a global case study in leaderless mobilization and was coordinated mostly on TikTok. In Nigeria, we've seen how young people use digital commentary to drive accountability on a lot of issues. We've seen Ghana's campus advocacy, how that has reinvented students organizing into real civic pleasure. And on a global landscape, we've seen from climate marches to campus protests, how by we, I mean the Gen Z, have demanded proof over promises. And what I want us to note is that all this did not come from traditional structures. It came from community, it came from shared values and digital trust. So this webinar is about understanding what it means for communication, mobilization, and the future of influence. Today, we are joined by four phenomenal voices, and each one would be offering a unique lens into the Gen Z behavior and influence across regions. We have Jeffrey Edu Yeboah, who is a youth leader and former vice president of the University of Ghana Student Representative Council. Jeffrey will bring grounded insights into how young people in Ghana organize, mobilize, and influence real outcomes beyond social media. His work spans student advocacy, community initiatives, and youth-driven impact across academic and civic spaces. Next on my list, we have Lesijulu Aite Eric Nwabuzo, a strategic communications professional whose work focuses on youth behavior,
Mm.
digital influence, and community building in Nigeria. She offers a sharp perspective on how young Nigerians shape narratives, push cultural shifts, and engage with institutions through value-driven digital communities. Our third panelist is Waruguru Kariuki, a communication and HR professional with experience across multiple African markets. She brings a nuanced understanding of how young people in Kenya mobilize around issues, shape public pressure online and offline, and define new expectations for transparency, values, and institutional behavior. Her insights will reflect the growing power of youth-driven momentum in shaping national conversations. And last on my list, but not the least, we have Machi Makula, a youth communication specialist whose work spans Europe, Africa, and global digital communities. He offers a broad perspective on how Gen Z forms identity, meaning, and trust in today's digital landscape, and how institutions should engage a generation that values authenticity, alignment, and moral coherence. His global vantage point will tie the continental conversation together. So, I hope you all as excited. Oh my God. You know, I was saying this thing before this webinar started that if NEPA does their thing, I was going to make a joke about it because this is why we are always protesting here in Nigeria. Why can't I have proper electricity to guide me through a webinar? But I digress. Um, I hope you're all as excited as I am to hear from our speakers today. Without further delay, we're going to begin, and each speaker is going to help us, to set context of what Gen Z identity and influence really looks like in their region. So I'm going to start with Jeffrey Eduyeboa. Hi, Jeffrey. Um, Ghana has seen students-driven organizing in real life, not just online, from the Fix the Country to campus advocacy. And influence has also moved offline in a lot of powerful ways. So my question for you is, what does influence look like when Gen Z steps beyond digital noise into real outcomes?
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. In fact, serving as vice president of Ghana's premier university, University of Ghana, I've had the opportunity to relate with a lot of youth on how um, influence really pull people together. And in fact, when you come to Ghana, for instance, ahead of the 2024 elections, especially within those periods, that is when the youth of our country are being amassed to follow certain agenda. And when you come to our country, for instance, it is just unfortunate that sometimes partisan politics rather influences people as compared to the real issues that the people are supposed to deal with. So let's take Stop Galamsey demonstration and all where the youth of our country are following, for instance. The real issue of Galamsey does not actually stop at the point where the youth rally on the streets to demonstrate against it. But it really happens when the youth that are even involved would stop in the first place, because the big men that are involved in stuff like that are not directly involved in it. They are working with the youth. And if the youth realize that things like these are detrimental to the growth of the country, and they would rather stop involving themselves in stuff like that, it rather gives the opportunity for other people that are not involved, who have a voice to say or who want to influence whatever they are doing positively, to be able to move in the right direction. So, in fact, aside the digital campaign that we do on social media, when it comes to when it comes to in person, please a minute.
Um, okay, he's back.
Thank you. So influence really happen when it comes to the youth. When people in our country or the youth in our country realize that, in fact, we are the future leaders. When I entered university, I literally had no idea about leadership and politics until I gave myself the opportunity to enter it. I entered it as I entered as a departmental executive until I got to the SRC level, where I influenced over 70,000 students. There was an opportunity for the students' body to whenever we had issues with management. And then like a major example was a point where our residential facility user fee was increased. It was increased by 50%. We wrote letters to management. We made a lot of noise on social media. Unfortunately, no one cared and no one listened to us. So we got our petitions together. We mobilized students, about 50 of them, and we walked to management at their offices and presented the petition to them. That landed us at the Ministry of Education, where at the end of the day, we got 25% reduction in the residential facility user fee that was imposed by management. This is how going on the ground in person to influence decisions by management was made possible as compared to just online demonstrations. So this is what I'll have to say in answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jeffrey. I really like, the last part you said about how you sent letters and it didn't go through, and then you had to like mobilize a group of students. And that just like really highlights how influence is tied to not just, like sending in letters but and just voices, but like real action. And it also really highlights, the idea of moving from digital noise to real life action, which is something that is constantly being echoed across Africa. Thank you so much for that, Jeffrey. So I'm going to move on to Leslie Jolu now. Hi, Leslie. You're in Nigeria, as I am
Yeah.
right now. And in Nigeria, the Nigeria of today, you know that influence is not just trend driven, it is frustration driven. From the cost of living commentary every day to insecurity to post-EndSARS accountability culture, it's a lot. So at such, what defines Gen Z identity and expression at this moment, particularly in Nigeria?
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I think beyond what is done, what this generation is most known for is that they have refused to outsource their power. This is a generation that has chosen to take its power back in terms of social opportunities, in terms of economic opportunities, and in terms of being able to use their voice. So I think that's the biggest thing I have noticed about Gen Z. So I'll give you a few like context. EndSARS, during the EndSARS protests, for those who don't know what that means, there was a time in Nigeria where police brutality was protested by largely Gen Z and then a few other generations. In that time, rather than wait for the institutions or the infrastructure that already existed to drive engagement, they created alternative systems. So where my generation and other generations have been focused on fixing what is broken, they simply built their own bridges, created their own processes, created their own infrastructure. So when this wasn't working, rather than wait and try to fix this, they just decided to pivot to what could work. This generation is marked by cynicism because they're very aware of what is wrong. But on the other hand, they are marked by practicality because even though they're aware of what is challenging, they quickly pivot to what can work. So I like the fact that, yes, they're starkly aware there's frustration. I mean, the cost of living is high. They're making fun of things that we complain about, but they're also finding solutions. So the cost of living is high, and they detail that. A young person goes to the market and says, last time I came here, this cost this. Now follow me as I find an alternative that does not cost as much as it costs here. And then they go into local markets and they're showing you alternatives. They're showing you what the reality is, but they're showing you how they're navigating that. So they refuse to outsource their power. That's the biggest thing that I see about this generation. They've taken personal agency as a real thing. And then they're creating alternative systems for themselves, alternative systems for economic growth, looking for jobs. A lot of young people have portfolio careers that are tied to their creativity. A lot of young people have alternative payment systems that do not necessarily bypass, but leverage what is possible with tech. A lot of young people are using their creativity to earn a living, but to also amplify their voices. And then they're documenting. Where with us, we complain, but we don't have evidence. A young person whips out a phone and is documenting injustice in real time, and this goes viral. They're not speaking at power, they're speaking to one another and leveraging collective voice to speak to power. And that's very powerful, in my opinion. I'll stop here, but that's my perspective. Now, for expression, like I said, they're expressing with agency, with personal agency, and an awareness that they have the power to change things and they don't need to wait. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You've highlighted something that we've here at the New Mark Group Limited we've noticed, but also I believe that everybody in Africa has noticed. We aren't Gen Zs are not waiting for leadership structures. collective action is leadership. You made mention of how, while older generations, from the boomers to the millennials, are trying to fix what has been broken. When we see that what has been broken is not working for us, we are building bridges and infrastructure. We are solving that problem. We are, marked by practicality. But we laugh at our problems a
Mm.
lot. I don't think anybody laughs at Nigerians the way we make fun of ourselves. But while we're done laughing with ourselves, we come back and we're like, okay, fine, we're done laughing. What's the solution? So that's really is it. And we see that every day, finding one solution after the other and using creativity to solve our problems and also most importantly to document a lot of things. I hope everybody is taking notes and clocking everything that is being said because I don't think you hear this conversation anywhere else again. So thank you so much for that, Leslie. So now I'm going to move to Waruguru. Hi, Waruguru. This year, particularly, and maybe it's because I've had lots of dealings with more Kenyan people. And being in tune with the news and what is being said. I know that Kenya this year has given the world one of the strongest examples of decentralized mobilization. No formal leaders, no traditional organizations, just Gen Z saying we move. So, with the youth protests that have happened in Kenya between 2024 and 2025, they've proved that influence can exist without leaders or structure. Now, what moments do you think tipped online anger into physical mobilization?
Thanks, Anshel. And like you said before, I think this is a very timely conversation. And I love some of the things that Leslie has said, and they've really resonated. When I think back to that time, it was very pivotal for Kenyans because we didn't think it would have been possible. It actually panned out. And when I tried to think about what was the real tipping point, it's when we moved from online frustration to maybe informed frustration, I would call it. So during that time, a lot of civic education happened, and this was created by the Gen Z themselves. When I think of myself, most of the times I don't even know what's going on in parliament or what bills are being passed through. But then I think the shift took place when young people took it in their hands to break down the finance bill. So, for those who don't know, the finance bill is what translated to the very popular protests we had in Kenya. It was coming at a year where taxes had been crazy. You were looking at your pay slip, you've had housing levy put on that, different medical things put on that, and that time your pay is not increasing. So, when you think about the cost of living, your take home, looking at how business are being operated, the finance bill was going to be looking like the end of things. But when this information was translated to a simple language, TikTok was a very big platform that was used, and X, which is now formerly Twitter, suddenly the issues didn't seem abstract. It made sense, and you could see how this translated to your day-to-day living. And I think that wave of peer-to-peer civic education changed everything. And when we started from a point of we're angry, that something needs to be done, it also meant that we need to understand that action needs to be taken and that there's power in numbers. And what Leslie said that Gen Z are not outsourcing their power. When I remember back to that time, the government then was trying to figure out who is leading these protests, who is financing these protests. And it was completely organic. There was nobody leading us. There was nobody shifting and making payments for things to happen. It was a conversation of who's standing with us because you could see how this is reflecting in real time day. And I think that emotion is what tipped everybody off and we were thinking now this is a bit more clearer. There's education that has been translated to all of this. And if you were not part of the protest, you actually felt like you're missing out on something or you're failing your nation in taking part of this. And it was beautiful to see that it translated towards the end. The government felt the pressure. The finance bill did not go through. But what was great to see that it moved from the timeline to the streets, and you could see the physical mobilization. Very, very peaceful protests took place that time. And I think that's what helped. The civic education, peer-to-peer education, making it have a simple language, making it make sense for everybody, and moving it from an abstract space really, really made a difference.
Those were such powerful insights,
Mm.
Wargo. Thank you so much for that. I like a lot of things that you said, but mainly what you highlighted about peer-to-peer and civic education. And also what you also mentioned about the government wondering who was financing the protest. Meanwhile, it was just organic. It was just people coming together, people who, like in Nigeria, they'll say they know where the shoe was biting them in their legs. Like they felt the pain. So they were all coming together. So yes, thank you so much. What you said also connects beautifully to what Jeffrey and Leslie have both raised about how Gen Zs are redefining what communication looks like, what influence and impact, look like. So thank you so much for that. Uh, as we continue, please, if you have any questions, drop in the Q&A box and keep dropping your comments in the chat sections and just keep reacting as we're going. Now we're shifting to a global perspective. Mache, with your global viewpoint on youth culture and value-driven movements, we're seeing Gen Zs coordinate climate protests, campus occupations, and value-led movements with a consistency that almost seems like the algorithm is in their favor. And while we know that identity is now built in digital spaces, we also know that community has sort of like started replacing hierarchy. What do these patterns tell us about how this generation forms identity and meaning in digital spaces?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And first of all, Gen Z, thank you very much for your presence, for your power, for your enthusiasm, especially in Africa. Keep on moving because Africa, many African countries need your enthusiasm because you have to build the future. You're doing this actually now, building the future of your countries. Thank you very much. And from the global point of view, I would say that especially for this generation, Gen Z, I'm not Gen Z, I'm millennial, late millennial, but for Gen Z generation, the digital space is not a tool. This is not a tool for you guys. It's a place. It's a real place. It's where meaning happens. Somebody used to say it's virtual. It's virtual. Those TikTok and digital spaces. It's totally real. It's totally real for you because the digital space has become the real place. Sometimes the only place for many Gen Z. It's this kind of communication, and when Gen Z mobilizes across the countries, across continents, it shows us one thing very clearly, that many times this identity is built in networks, in this digital space. And this digital space, it's a place also to share emotions, not only to begin some events, to share emotions. One can share emotions in this space. Then I would say that for previous generations, many times identity was local first and only local, not global. For Gen Z, it's the opposite. Many times, because of the internet, faster and faster internet, also in Africa, the Gen Z feels global first and only later local, many times. And their sense of who I am comes from values they share with people they may never physically meet in other countries. It's all about justice, climate, freedom, dignity. So I would say that their tribe is not a neighborhood nowadays of the Gen Z. Their tribe is a timeline many times. So Gen Z don't use social media to express own identity. That they build identity there in the digital space through stories and through movements, through reactions and so on. So there's the real global lesson for us. If you want to understand Gen Z, stop asking what they think. Stop asking what they think. Go inside the social media, go inside the digital space, digital continent, and start watching what they join. You want to work with Gen Z? Okay, go online on some social media platforms, where they actually where you can meet actually them, not only in the CEO's office. That's not their world. It's first of all in social media, digital platforms. And for years in Europe, in America, we told Africa stories from the outside, white people. I've traveled a lot to Africa, more than 60 times I've been there. I'm traveling a lot, doing documentaries, but that's no longer enough. We don't need Africa explained by outsiders anymore. We need Africa told by Gen Z from inside. And this is your story now, guys. Gen Z, your struggle, this is your mission. And it's time to pass the camera, the mic, and the decision-making power to you. It's your time of Gen Z for Africa.
Thank you so much. And my fellow Gen Zs are on the call. I hope you heard. This is our struggle now. It's the power is basically in our hands right now. But I'm just reading a couple of comments, and I've seen that there's one I want to highlight, which is based on what Machi just said, which is the digital space is not a tool for Gen Z. It's a real space for them to live, express, and mobilize themselves, which is a clear distinction from, older generations. So yes, thank you so much for, these insights. And as usual, they've, aligned with what the previous speakers have also said so far in this conversation. So now that we've said that, we've set, the context as to how this influence is and this Gen Z revolution so far has been for different countries and on the global landscape. Let's talk more about influence. What actually makes Gen Z pay attention, trust, and move? Because beyond identity and expression, the real conversation is how does influence turn into impact? How does it move from conversation to action? So, Jeffrey, I'm coming back to you. You've lived this firsthand. Influence today is no longer about voice, but about outcome. So, from your work as Vice President of SRC on campus and beyond, what has shown you that Gen Z influence can actually shift system, not just through conversations, but through actions? And what does that teach you about where youth power is headed in Ghana? Do I still have Jeffrey on the call, or has he dropped off due to network? Can't seem to hear Jeffrey. Okay, while we're waiting for Jeffrey, I think I can just ask Wargur the next question. No, I mean Leslie. So while we're waiting for Jeffrey, Leslie, you've
Yeah,
watched how digital communities, not just institutions, have shaped narratives. What are the influence patterns that you see emerging, especially when leadership is collective rather than centralized?
okay. So I really love this question because it gets at something fundamental. We keep calling it decentralized leadership, like it's some strategy that Gen Z created. But actually, they didn't choose decentralization. They inherited it because of distrust of single leaders. So every centralized leader that they've ever seen or watched has been compromised, has disappeared, or has sold out. So when we ask what patterns are emerging, we need to understand first that this is not innovation, it is adaptation. It's adaptation to what they have observed over the years and have come to distrust. So I'd like to say I've noticed 4 patterns of influence. And one of them would be that they amplify in a web. So it's not that one person is speaking, it's that someone brings something up and everyone lends their perspectives to it. And after a while, it is collective influence that moves the needle. So it's different perspectives. Where before there was a pyramid model, one leader at the top, the masses at the bottom. Now it's a relay network where people take it and just bounces from one person to the end and it just ripples all the way out. So a micro influencer with maybe 5,000 followers shares something. And then the next thing, people who think, oh, I agree with that, add a layer of perspective to it. And then it goes on and on and on and on. And because they're sharing from lived reality, it's not something that someone said to them. Because it's lived reality, other people who can relate to that lived reality are then able to share their perspectives. The second thing I've noticed is they choose people who know what they're saying over celebrities. So you may have noticed with things like mobile phone reviews or brand reviews, that sort of thing. If a person comes and says, this is my experience with this, and is able to articulate it clearly, other people understand what they're saying and then lend their voices to it. So a celebrity comes out and people might listen because they're a celebrity. But once they find someone who actually knows what they're talking about and can demonstrate that, they go with that. So influence has also translated into some sort of expertise or a recognition of expertise in an area. The third thing I would like to say is accountability. So influence is also tied to people being able to say, no, that's not the case. No, that's not the case. So call out culture is a huge part of public accountability. Being able to say, a brand comes out and says, oh, we do this, we're the best at this, we're the best at that. And the next thing you see is receipts. People saying, oh, this was my experience and it doesn't tally. This is what I encountered and I don't quite agree. Oh, this is proof that that's not the truth. Oh, this is proof that what you're saying is not actually the reality. And that becomes quality control. Yes. So where before someone could come out and say, oh, come out in mainstream media and say, this is what is, and there were no counter voices. Now people don't just say, no, that's not what it is. They have proof that they have tracked over time or kept evidence of to counter that. The fourth thing I would like to say is small movements. Before, influence usually went to the biggest person, the loudest voice in the room. Now, there's such a thing as macro and micro influence, where people who don't necessarily have very many people following them have a solid engagement strategy for the people who follow them because of shared values. So community is influence. In fact, community is the bedrock of influence. Those are the patterns that I've seen. Those are the ones that are really, they stand out to me. So where before it would require one big push, one massive thing, one central leader, decentralization, expertise over just fame, community and shared interests and values, and all of this come together to solidify into actual influence. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Community is influence. And as a Gen Z living in this time, what a time it is to be alive because I always tell people be very careful of your digital footprint and what you are doing online because there will be receipts. And I like how you really highlighted the whole part about accountability and a lot of things will happen. The government can come and say something, and even we even do it with ourselves. Somebody says something and you're like, didn't you say this 5 years ago? This was you, isn't this you? So yes. And I also really like what you said about, the whole relatability issue because fine, a celebrity might be an ambassador of a brand, but when you see somebody who is like you and I would say like the common man, if I can say that, you are just like, oh, okay, if this person is using it, they're saying it works for them. So I mean, I could try it. So thank you so much for highlighting that. I think Jeffrey is back. So I will just go back to Jeffrey and just ask my question again. So Jeffrey, I was saying that influence today is no longer just about voice, but about outcome. From your own work on campus as vice president of, SRC and beyond, what has shown you that Gen Z influence can actually shift systems, not just conversations? And what does that teach you about where youth power is headed in Ghana?
Okay. Okay. So indeed, the influence is not just about voice, but about outcome. And I would say that because, in fact, a lot of people a lot of people rush to actually speak than to actually get the work done. One thing I've realized among the youth of our country today, or the youth in our world today, is that people are fast to have ambitions but are not fast in terms of working on their own selves to get ready for whatever has to be done. So most of the time, there are people that really want to get into the public space, really want to make impact. But when you ask them or you give them the opportunity to make the impact, they do only a little, or they show only a little of the works that they can offer or they can do. And that sometimes become problematic. So indeed, voicing out whatever needs to be done is not even as compared to the kind of work that goes into getting the work done. And today, because the future indeed relies on the youth, or the future indeed lies on the youth must actually be participative in terms of getting whatever agenda there is done. Serving as vice president, I had the opportunity to organize one of the biggest programs we did on campus. It was actually a gospel program, and then we were filling a 15,000 seater stadium. I had to gather about 100 people into one group. I spoke to them, had conversations with them. We prepared months before the program. I had to actually be very consistent on them. I mean, offer some sort of incentives to them, make sure that everybody had daily target that they are supposed to reach for days and months before the D-Day of the program. On the day of the program, we had over 15,000 people attending the program. And I believe that that was not just because of the noise we made about the program on the media, but because of consistency, hard work, and the willingness of the people that were involved to get the job done. So indeed, outcome indeed is very important, but it really lies on the individuals who would be willing and available to get whatever there is to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. This just ties it back to what Mache said during the last question, where he said that this is a Gen Z struggle right now, and the digital space is not just a tool, but a real place for the Gen Zs. And you were able to see that firsthand, how that turned out with the people you were able to gather together and the impact it had, and how that translated into conversions with the amount of people that attended the event that you had planned. Thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. Now I'm going back to Ken.
Something is wrong. Something must be wrong. Something must be wrong with MCHL. Warguru, maybe you would be moving on.
Okay, I think so.
I
We
think,
have
yeah.
we have a network issue, so probably I could just take it on before she comes back. Okay, cool. Because either way, I have the list of questions. So just to give oversight, so I was going to respond to the next question. And Mchel's question to me was, when Gen Z demands transparency, are they seeking accountability, belonging, or a new definition of power? And when I received this question, what came to mind first was, I don't think we could single out any of these three elements. I think what Gen Z is trying to do is have a redefinition of power, but then the accountability and belonging is a part of it. And just going back to the protest that we had, young people were live streaming the different parliamentary debates that were going on during the protests. You are not waiting for the media institutions to interpret anything for us. And I think about that time, we also went through some phase of internet shutdown, or those slow internet. People still went out to find real information and timely information on what's going on. The finance bill was a very big document. When you think about bills that are put in parliament, that's why most of us don't read them. It's a very long document with a lot of jargon that is put in. So when people took time to translate the clauses, they fact-checked the statements that have been put there. You explain the processes in real time. The civic education happens. And that was also a declaration that power should not be sitting with specific people. Information should not sit with specific people and sit behind closed doors. So transparency, I think, is the doorway for Gen Z because they would like to feel included. They want to hold institutions accountable. What's happening now in the country, and I say this quite frequently on X or sometimes in some newspapers, when the president speaks on something, let's say if today he says that the price of flour has moved from 89 shillings to 50 shillings, people go to supermarkets to actually confirm whether this is true. right? Same thing happens when he's talking about building new dams. How much was spent? People are going granular into the facts to see, does this actually make sense? Is this genuine? And you actually see this panning across workplaces. So in my field, because I'm in HR and as a practitioner, I've had a chance to work with different generations, I would say. And you could see that for Gen Zs, they're very transparent. If you would like to pass any decision within the organization, the first question is why? You have to say why this is happening or what impact will this have on the business. And if you look at the former generations such as millennials or boomers, most times when something is being put across organizational change, maybe you're changing salaries, it goes through quite easily. But for Gen Zs, you have to explain why are we making this change? What impact does it have? We're also very big on co-creation. And that you will see across even different organizations and how they want to span work happening. If you want to learn Gen Z to understand them, you need to have them as part of the conversation. And it's not just a matter of sending information from a top-down perspective. I think Emshel has spoken to this before, where it easily could go from down up. But once you communicate with Gen Zs clearly, the resistance drops and the engagement arises. So when Gen Zs ask for transparency, they just want to be partners to the conversations and not really spectators. And I think that's a new, more collaborative way to define power. And you could be able to see the element of accountability or belonging coming into it. So I
Thank
don't know
you
if
so
Michelle, okay, good. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
back.
I'm here. I'm here.
Mhm.
Thank you. So, you see, sorry, I'm going to make another joke about this. Another thing, we need proper network. When I go and start protesting now, people be wondering why I'm protesting, and my network can be stable, man. But thank you so much for the insights you shared, Warger. By the time I got back in, what I was hearing you say is that transparency is the doorway for Gen Z. We want to know what is going on. And once things are being properly communicated, there is a lot less resistance because, and I think that is just normal because, I mean, if you're telling us this is why you're doing something and you state out the reason, the reasons sound reasonable to us, obviously there won't be any resistance. So thank you so much for sharing that. Martin, globally, we are watching institutions struggle because they are still, instead of communicating with young people, they are communicating at them. There's a difference. You're not reaching them like you should. And like all the speakers and what has been said so far in this webinar, we expect proof, not promises. So what do you believe has shaped this generation's resistance to performative communication, particularly from traditional authority?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, Gen Z, you need to understand that your presence in the digital continent, in this digital space, is extremely important for the whole world. You need to understand this, that we need you because you are shaping tomorrow. We are shaping today. We are shaping tomorrow of your countries. You are shaping tomorrow of the whole world. So this is extremely important. And thank you very much for your presence. And in terms of authority, that is true that Gen Z sometimes doesn't like authority, but I would say that Gen Z doesn't hate authority. They hate pretending. I hate pretending. All of us hate pretending. And Gen Z shows us that we need to be hating pretending. When somebody is pretending, I don't like it. So, and that didn't come from the theory. It came from watching the world up close in real time. We need to know that Gen Z is the first generation that grew up with a camera pointed at power 24/7, wars streamed, politicians exposed in screenshots, promises made on Monday broken by Tuesday, Friday, and so on. So this generation learned one simple rule. If it's real, they feel it. If it's fake, they spot it. They don't like it. It's all about authority. They also grew up inside systems that reward performance over truth. We know that. Perfect images, social media, perfect lives, perfect brands. And the result, many times overdose. Filters everywhere, scripts everywhere, smiles without substance. Yeah, sometimes overdose. But they developed this kind of radar. The Gen Z developed this radar, and they smell contradictions faster than us, faster than any focus group. And globally, this looks the same everywhere. Everywhere you go, it looks the same. So this is why the real proof became their language. Show me the numbers, show me the processes, show me the real change, not in a report, not written text, in a real life. And I think once again that Africa shows this very clearly. And maybe there is a very uncomfortable truth for institutions worldwide. Gen Z is not impressed by tradition. No, you are not impressed by tradition. Gen Z is impressed by impact, by fast communication, by community, also digital community on the digital continent. Gen Z doesn't build trust with slogans anymore. They build it with consistency, with decisions. And the simple truth, if you want Gen Z to trust you, don't just talk about values. Live with them. If young people matter to you, to your institution, let them really lead, not just sit and listen. We've just heard about this. Don't just sit and listen with this generation. Talk to them, all right, but let them really lead your institutions. Gen Z is not against institutions. They are against empty words. They are not demanding too much. They are normal. They are just done with pretending. It's enough of this pretending. So if you want to understand Africa's future, talk to its Gen Z now. You know, Africa is the youngest continent on Earth, and its future is already here on smartphones, in movements, in digital communities. You organize, learn, protest, build, connect globally. But if institutions keep planning Africa without this generation, without African Gen Z at the table, they will keep failing Africa fast and loudly. So Gen Z in Africa is not waiting for permission, no more. They move very fast, they move on very fast. And that's good, Thank you very much.
I don't even know where to start from because you've given out so many gems, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts and see where do I start from. But my God, Gen Zs do not hate authority. They hate pretending. So enough with the pretense. We don't hate institution. We just want to feel like, like something is real. You're not just talking at us. You are understanding us. You are talking with us. I had to write this down. I mean, if it's fake, we're catching it from a mile away. But if it's real, you don't have to like sell yourself so hard to us. And we know that yes, oh, what this person is saying is real. So thank you so much for sharing that. You also mentioned that Gen Z is not impressed by tradition, but rather by impact, by communication, and most importantly by community. And that brings us back to, the digital community. And on a lighter note, to my fellow Gen Zs here, if nobody has told you that you are needed, Professor Machi has told you today, Gen Z is needed. That is how much important we are. So thank you so much for that insight that you shared. Now, I honestly don't want this conversation to end because I'm actually enjoying it a lot much more than I thought I would, but all good things have to come to an end. So as we wrap up what has been such a rich and engaging conversation, I want the speakers to leave us with a few hot, spicy nuggets, the kind of insights that stay with you, long after you log off today. So, just, a quick question for the panelists. The first one is for Jeffrey and Waruguru. If an institution truly wants to influence and engage Gen Z in a meaningful way, where should they really start? Should it be in the messaging, the medium or channel, or the mindset? And beyond campaigns and content, like what does real access to this generation actually look like? So Jeffrey, you can go first, and then Waruguru, you can, go next. Mm, if you don't have Jeffrey here, I think Waruguru, you can go, and then when he's back, he can go.
Okay. Thanks, Emchel. I'm happy to start. So I think institutions need to start with a mindset. Like I said before, we need to shift from communicating to Gen Zs and co-creating with them. So we don't need to see Gen Z as a target audience, rather have them as collaborators. And like I mentioned before, we used TikTok to leverage civic education and outline the protests. So you can see the different ways that the platform has been used. It wasn't for entertainment, it was for civic education. So this means that access goes far beyond the campaigns. Invite them into the room before decisions are made. Co-designing the solutions with them, sharing information openly, makes them listen and adapt to what needs to be done. And you can always see this translated into the workplace. There's something very good that Prof had spoken to in terms of the African youth being quite large. When I think about some of the brands that we work on, where I'm currently based at in Diageo, when you're trying to think about the products you want to introduce to the market, you need Gen Z in Africa. They are the movement, they're the ones making being the movers and the shapers. So they want an influence that is real and not symbolic. So what I think is that as institutions, let's start with a mindset and then everything else will follow through and carry them across. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if Jeffrey is back. Okay. We can get back to him later. I'm going to move on to Leslie and Machi now. For both of you, in just one powerful sentence, what is the single most important thing about Gen Z's influence that you want everyone here to remember? So Leslie, you can go first, and then Machi.
Okay. So for me, the most important thing about Gen Z influence is, at least especially in Africa and the countries like Nigeria, is that it is community powered and it is driven by authenticity. Like both Waruguru and Matthew have said, if it is not real, they can tell. And the minute that you can tell that something is not real, then you don't buy into it. So influence is driven by authenticity and it is powered by community with Gen Z. Their credibility comes from lived experience, from transparency, from shared struggle. So it is community powered, it is authenticity driven. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Leslie. Machi, the same question.
Yeah, sure. I would say that shaping today is shaping tomorrow. And for Gen Z's real power is this. They don't wait for permission to influence. They build it together in real time across the world. Building today, they are building tomorrow. This generation doesn't need a stage, a title, an institution. It doesn't matter. Phone is enough today, also in Africa. The internet is enough. Network is enough. Shared values are enough. And sometimes we know that Gen Z doesn't follow influence. They create this influence. It's a bit different. We've heard they don't look for leaders. They become nodes in a global movement. They don't ask who is in charge. Yeah, they ask who is acting. Why are you doing this? And maybe this is a lesson for us, for millennials and boomers. If you want to shape the future, stop trying to control Gen Z. That's enough. Start moving at their speed. Get insight into the digital world and share their values. So I would say this. And shaping tomorrow, shaping today is shaping tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Those were really powerful insights. Um, So we're gonna take some questions from the audience now, which I can see some in the Q&A box. The first one, I think this is I think probably Waruguru would take it, and then the rest of the speakers, if they have any insight, they can add to it. The question is, Kenyan millennials, primarily in the media space, are saying that Gen Z are all talk, no action, specifically because the voter registration numbers are low. What are your thoughts on on this situation, and what would you say needs to happen for those numbers to go up?
Okay. I had a feeling a question like this would come up because I think it's pretty clear when you're on socials that the voter registration has become an issue. So for those who don't know, we're about to go into our elections in 2027. And in 2027, the current president, William Ruto, also has the opportunity to run once more. And looking at the protests and things that have happened, it's pretty clear that people would like an option to not have him on the seat. So when I think about voter registration and how come it's low, so first of all, I think when it comes to voting, we need to think about it not from a generational conversation. And if possible, for the millennials to not reference the Gen Zs as the ones who are not signing up. I mean, it's a collective thing, I would say. But also, when you look at the different generations, I think what we would need to do is to meet Gen Zs halfway. It's a very digital era. If there's a way possibly that guys could be able to sign up for voter registration digitally, why do I have to be looking for a registration center where my chief is, and yet there's so many different ways that these biometrics could be collected? I think also the other thing that needs to be done is there's an issue of trust. So most of the issues that people would like addressed have not been addressed yet. So what gives people the guarantee that when we go into the ballot, this will change? I think the other thing that you might probably have seen in mainstream media taking place as well is the current leader doesn't seem to want to leave the seat. And that makes people feel like, even if I take my vote, what does it mean? Because it seems at the end of the day, the elections might be rigged. So is it that we need to see a piece of work happening now that would motivate people to get into voter registration? Do we have the digital options for guys to sign up to become voters through this space? And I think that it's really looking at, I think low registration is a symptom of the big issue that we have. I don't think it's the root cause of what we're experiencing. And it's just a question about why should I plug into a system that hasn't proven to work? But then what I can actively see happening is there's this cancel culture that's going around where people are going to their Instagrams, to their Twitters, and they're rallying people to vote, to sign up for voter registration. And if you have a friend who hasn't signed up, you're canceling them. So it at least gets the noise out. Some influencers are coming on board just to tell people, guys, voter registration is open, you need to go and do it. So I think there's a bit more noise that needs to be made around it, but also there's a piece of work around the trust element just to ensure that guys get on board. So hopefully we'll see the numbers come through as we're getting close to the election. I think also there's always the time pressure conversation where when you know it's about to be voting time, then guys get the voters cards that they need. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, 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 it does. Thank you so much for that. I particularly like what you said about they should make this digital, digitalize it. If it's a thing whereby we can do it online, virtually, I'm sure they will see those numbers go up. But yeah, I think that's a conversation for another day. So there are a couple of more questions. Please, if I don't get to your questions, please forgive me. You can see me in camera. Yo, I will still proceed because Nigeria will be doing you. But then you also have to do Nigeria back. So I'm going to proceed like this. I think there's another question. A person is asking, how can young people create opportunities when systems are slow to change? I think, Samachi, you can take this.
Yeah, okay. When the system is very slow to change. Maybe I wouldn't answer this question directly, but maybe a short story from my university from here last week. I had a class at university with Gen Z, with young people, about different communication styles across generations, and I asked them what bothers them most about us, millennials, and the boomers, the older ones, because we need to cooperate in different institutions. And what they would like to change, because this is true that us, boomers and millennials, we need to change. We have to change our mindset about Gen Z and about the next generation, Gen Alpha, of course, as well. And their answer was very simple and strong. What hurts us the most is that you don't trust us, that you don't trust us. It was powerful, very powerful. Young people, 20, 22, 25 years old, saying, you don't trust us. And we talked about it for a long time. And their answer was very brutal and honest. You don't trust us. Not enough trust to lead, not enough trust to decide, not enough trust to fail and grow. If you truly want their energy of Gen Z, creativity, loyalty, trust must come first. Without trust, there is no future collaboration. So I would say, stop helping. It's for me. Stop helping Gen Z. Start trusting them, because without trust, there is no future between you. There is no cooperation, collaboration between you, millennial and boomer, and between Gen Z. Start trusting them. They are going to make a lot of mistakes, but start trusting them. So this is the first step, I would say, for the future institutional collaboration between us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I hope the person who asked that question has gotten their answers. It's been thrown back to other people. You need to make a situation where the Gen Z can trust you. And I'm going to take one more question, and that would be for Leslie Jolu. How do organizations need to position to maximize power of Gen Zs in this age of influence? If you could just answer this quickly so that we can, move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So first and foremost, collaboration. You need to seed power to Gen Z to see what they're capable of. Like Matthew just said, there's a distrust of younger people. I don't know where that comes from. I think it is a false sense of pride that because we're older, we're better. Yes, we may have the benefit of experience, but they have benefit of a wider perspective because they live in a generation where there are many tools at their disposal and they are open to learning these tools and they're adept at using these tools. What that means is that efficiency and speed come a lot more naturally to Gen Z than to those of us who are slightly older. So what would I say? Change your mindset from, oh, let's see what you have to offer so we can approve it, to let's build this together. Change your mindset from let's suggest something and let's see where we can integrate it, to what do you think would work under these circumstances and in this context and why. It will surprise you that the reasoning of Gen Zs takes into account many possibilities that we don't even see. We're blindsided by what we know and what we're familiar with. They are open to opportunities and to possibilities in a way that makes it possible for you to scale, for you to grow, and for you to approach things with a greater sense of courage. They are not unwilling to fall or to fail. So where we are risk conscious over possibilities conscious, they are more conscious of possibilities and willing to take those on. So what I would say to you is co-design instead of giving approval. Invite into the room when you're building instead of when you're done and seeking just feedback. Share power. So there's something about saying, come in, give us your suggestions, but we're in charge. If you're willing to share power, so this and this and this and this, we give you autonomy over, and back your word with action. So if you say they have autonomy, then give them autonomy. Acknowledge personal mistakes, honestly. If you're able to say, here's where I failed, or here's where I went wrong, and I'm sorry for this, you earn the trust of people because they are no longer afraid to fail. And they also know that failure will not mean the end of them, so to speak. And then stop over polishing. Stop this thing where we make it seem like it's all perfection, we have it all together, is false. They can see through it. Next thing, meet them where they're at. So don't expect them to conform and to adapt to things as they have always been. Find out what new possibilities exist and integrate those so that you can meet them where they're at. So you may not be able to fully grasp their channels and their platforms, but you can ask for help, you can ask for support. And maybe you're not a digital native, but you can become a more frequent digital visitor. Yes. And finally, what I would say is proof should come from transparency, not just from saying things. I think that if you're able to integrate all of these things, give increasing power, collaborate better, design with them hand in hand instead of talking to them, change from permission and approval to collaboration. I think that these things will make a huge difference and meet them where they're at. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you all so much for the insights and everything basically that you shared. So we're slowly but steadily coming to the end of this conversation, and I think I just want to like really highlight just a couple of things that has been said throughout this entire conversation, which is that Gen Z influence is decentralized, trust is earned through transparency, mobilization is community driven, and communication is a two-way conversation. You want to communicate with the Gen Z, not at them. We aren't waiting, the Gen Z, we're not waiting to inherit, power. This is not a generational wealth or Nepo baby struggle for us. We are redesigning it. So thank you all so much for highlighting that. As we conclude today's webinar session, I'm very, happy to announce that this webinar will be published on Newmark's YouTube channel. So feel free to visit and learn more on this topic. It's going to be communicated to you via email. And I'm sure there are other groups where find the communication that this has been published, but also kindly engage with us if you really enjoyed this conversation. Engage with us on our social media platforms. On Facebook, we are at Newmark Group Limited. X is Newmark World. LinkedIn is the Newmark Group, and Instagram is Newmark Digital. Thank you all once again for your participation and engagement today. We look forward to seeing you at our next Influence 21 session. And I urge you, as you go out today, as you continue with the rest of your activities, as you are doing your Dirty December, continue this important conversation of Gen Z across Africa and globally. Thank you all once again and have a wonderful rest of day.